So let's talk about Scotland. Recently, it was announced with a report that their budget deficit is higher than that of the rest of the United Kingdom's, which is quite interesting, because their deficit was so bad it equated to 7.5% of GDP, which some Scottish ministers, the Finance Secretary no less, Derek Mackey, believes that this is the indicator that Scotland needs to have absolute control over its finances and or independence. Understandably, opposition disagree with this, with the Conservatives saying, "You're not exactly the most fiscally responsible, are you?" And Willie Rennie of the Liberal Democrats in Scotland saying that Sturgeon is now dodging questions with regards to GERS after she refused to host the GERS press conference because she has no answer for it. Currently, the SNP are spending a lot of money on projects. The counter-arguments to this are that the SNP are spending money on things that they shouldn't be spending it on, like Trident. Well, let's talk about all of this. First of all, Trident is the United Kingdom, so that's something you don't have control over. You do, however, receive a rather substantial amount of money from the United Kingdom, and yet you are blowing it, which is quite interesting. The latest government expenditure and revenue Scotland figures showed the gap was almost £2,000 per person. This was between cut public expenses, debt repayment and total tax revenues. Scotland's national deficit is £12.6 billion. That is the 7% of their GDP, while the UK without Scotland is £10.9 billion. If you include Scotland into that, it's still only about 2% GDP, so it's 1% without them. Total state funding in Scotland is £1,661 higher per person than the UK average, which is at £75.3 billion, with the rest of the UK spending £62.7 billion, which is £307 less per person. We could sit here all day and argue that Scotland are actually not doing so bad when you think of some of the services they provide. It has cropped up in PMQs on many occasions that the SNP are quite happy to gloat about how good their NHS is. However, when you are continually adding to national debt, which by the way is consistent actually, it has been consistently around the 7% marker for the last 5 years. Says a lot. But they are consistently able to provide certain services that should be admired. It's just a shame that to achieve that, they're having to tax people higher so their deficit doesn't get higher. Let's not forget here that with all this additional income coming from additional taxes that they have started charging, they haven't done anything to tackle any of their issues, which will eventually become a problem. Now, if you remove oil revenues, the deficit actually exceeds $14 billion, which is 22.5% of tax revenues. This isn't a good thing, by the way. This is why I don't support governments borrowing money. It's why I don't like the idea of living beyond your means. There is an argument I've seen on Twitter many times about fiscal responsibility or fiscal conservatism. Now, I'm not going to be drawn into the argument when it comes to the American one because it's not my business at the moment. It's not relevant to this video, but the term is quite interesting. Because much like the Mayor of London, the SNP, while they are investing in some areas where the UK as a whole really should, they don't really have the money to do it. So they're doing it mostly for optics, because it keeps them in power. Even the Liberal Democrat leader in Scotland, Willie Rennie, recognises this. While he points out there are holes in the economics that the SNP are putting forward, he also mentioned that the SNP are recklessly spending, and that's why so many voted to stay a part of the United Kingdom back in 2014. But the fiscal conservatism or responsibility argument comes up a lot, because some people like to say they'll do things and then they don't think about how they're going to do it. And that's a trend I don't like. It's reckless. But even though we don't have a system like Americans, it is, in this country, still a glorified popularity contest, where currently a geriatric 70-something-year-old is being considered worthy of being Prime Minister when his policies would include bankrupting the country. By borrowing so that our GDP deficit went so high, there would be about 6 or 7 generations that wouldn't be able to pay it off. And because of his age, he wouldn't have to live with the consequences of it, while living in a rather nice £1 million house. Now, I could also credit Scotland for the quality of services, but then I have to point out that the quality will diminish when eventually they crash. This is not proof you need independence for total control of your own economics. No, this is a warning sign that you are spending recklessly, and because you're not in control, even though you are, but you're proving you're not worthy of it, this will just lead others to say, maybe you guys should lose your autonomy altogether. Which you won't, but this will not help in the fight to get more powers devolved to you. I think if anything, this would reinforce the belief that you shouldn't be allowed any autonomy with your economics.